You're in the shower, or walking somewhere, or lying in bed, trying to sleep, and suddenly you're having a full conversation with someone who isn't there. You rehearse what you'll say. You imagine what they'll say back. You come up with the perfect response, the clever line, the exact words. Sometimes you replay it 5, 10 times, each version slightly different. And then, half the time, the real conversation never even happens, or it goes nothing like you practiced. So why does your brain do this? Why do you spend so much mental energy rehearsing conversations that may never occur? It turns out there's a real reason, and it says something surprisingly deep about how your mind tries to protect you. First, let's get one thing out of the way. This is extremely common. If you do this, you are not strange, and you are definitely not the only one. Psychologists have a name for part of this. It's related to something called anticipatory thinking, the brain's habit of mentally simulating future events before they happen. And conversations are one of the most common things people simulate, because conversations are unpredictable, and your brain does not like unpredictable. Think about it. A conversation is one of the few everyday situations where you genuinely cannot control the outcome. You don't know what the other person will say. You don't know how they'll react. You don't know if it'll go well or badly. And for a brain whose entire job is to keep you safe by predicting what comes next, that uncertainty registers as a small threat. So your mind does what it does best. It tries to run the simulation in advance. Here's something most people don't realize about their own minds. Your brain is, fundamentally, a prediction machine. It is constantly trying to guess what's about to happen next, a fraction of a second ahead, a few minutes ahead, sometimes days ahead. This isn't a flaw. It's one of the most powerful things the human brain does. Predicting the future, even imperfectly, is how our ancestors survived. The brain that could imagine, if I walk toward that sound, a predator might be there, survived longer than the brain that didn't think ahead. When you rehearse a conversation, you're running that same ancient machinery, just pointed at a modern social situation. Your brain is essentially asking, if I say this, what happens? And if that happens, what do I say next? It's building a map of possible futures so that, when the real moment comes, you're not caught off guard. This is why you often rehearse conversations that matter emotionally. Confronting someone, asking for something difficult, an interview, a breakup, an apology. The higher the emotional stakes, the more your brain wants to simulate it first, because the cost of getting it wrong feels higher. In a sense, rehearsing is your brain trying to lower the risk of an unpredictable, high-stakes moment by practicing it where it's safe, inside your own head, where nothing can actually go wrong. Here's where it gets important, because this same habit can either help you or quietly drain you, depending on how it plays out. On the helpful side, light rehearsal genuinely works. Mentally walking through a difficult conversation once or twice can lower anxiety, help you organize your thoughts, and make you feel more prepared. Athletes do a version of this. It's called visualization, and it measurably improves performance. A little mental preparation before a hard talk is your brain doing you a favor. But there's a darker version. When rehearsal stops being preparation and becomes a loop, replaying the same conversation over and over, imagining every possible disaster, rehearsing 20 different versions of something that hasn't happened and may never happen. That's no longer helping you. That's a form of anxiety, and psychologists sometimes link it to a pattern called rumination. The difference is subtle but important. Preparation has an end point. You think it through, you feel readier, you stop. Rumination has no end point. You keep circling, and instead of feeling calmer, you feel more anxious each time. If you've ever rehearsed a conversation so many times that you actually felt worse, more nervous, more convinced it would go badly, you've felt the moment where a helpful instinct tips over into an exhausting one. And here's the strange part everyone notices eventually. No matter how much you rehearse, the real conversation almost never goes the way you imagined. There's a reason for that. When you rehearse, you're playing both characters. You control your lines and theirs. But in reality, the other person has their own brain, their own mood, their own completely unpredictable responses. The version in your head was always a fiction, a one-person play where you wrote all the parts. This is actually freeing once you understand it. The rehearsal was never really about predicting the conversation accurately, because that's impossible. It was about your brain trying to feel safe before stepping into the unknown. And knowing that, you can start to hold those rehearsals more lightly, using them to prepare, without believing the imaginary version is how things will actually unfold. So the next time you catch yourself deep in an imaginary conversation, you don't need to fight it or feel broken for doing it. It's your brain doing exactly what it evolved to do. But you can ask yourself one quiet question: am I preparing or am I looping? If you've thought it through once and you feel readier, you're done. Let it go. If you're on the 10th replay and feeling worse, that's your signal that this has stopped being useful, and the kindest thing you can do is gently step out of the loop. Your brain rehearses because it cares about protecting you. You just don't have to let it run the same scene forever.